Underground. This is Discussions of Truth. Ian Trottier here with you. Coming up here this hour, Cassandra Spencer. This is a pre-recorded episode, and what I have described here is that of recent I have been out of studio. So again, the show is show's in its coming up on its in its fourth season. It's coming up on its fifth year of doing this. I started the show in South Beach, and for 3.5, close to 4 years, the show aired from Wynwood Radio. And then because of the need to really make the show mobile, I went to a mobile platform, and the show it typically is heard live Wednesdays at 5 p.m. On Wynwood1.com. I'd actually make that, see if that is Wynwood1.radio, see if that domain is available. Anyway, so the quick on this is that IanTrottier.com was taken down, folks, taken down. So the show began as the Florida Sun and Spray Show. That lasted probably 2 months at Wynwood Radio. And then Adrian, the owner of the station, then came to me and said, "Hey, Ian, what you really got here is a discussion of truth. Just from the various folks that I had on the program, Charlotte Eisbert, former Reagan advisor. Look, I typically try to not take sides politically, but yeah, there's certain things that I have realized." That I should be and do need to be kind of voicing an opinion on. So the past couple months, I've been involved with the Google whistleblower. His name is Zach Voorhees, and I'd really gotten behind his whistleblowing and took it to the then sitting president, Donald Trump. Whereas on the video on my website, I'm not sure if it's seen, but if you click on the tag that says prize fighter or the headline, then that'll take you to the video that shows shows Donald J. Trump calling me a prize fighter. He did. We were at the restaurant in Doral, the Doral National Golf Club, and he walks in and look, the story behind that is that I had pushed Voorhees' agenda to people that are very close to the president, and I said, hey, you've got to get this guy's message out to the president as soon as possible. And it was about 10 o'clock at night, and Donald had given his presentation at the NBC Town Hall, Biscayne Bay, at the Perez Art Museum at the time, and I returned to Doral. Unbeknownst to any of us there at the time, I didn't know that he was going to be coming in. He walked into the restaurant, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America, and he walks up to Voorhees and he says, "Thanks for your service, American hero." And he points at me. I mean, there's probably 200 people in the room. And he points at me and he says, "Hey, who's this guy? He looks like a prize fighter." So anyway, I have not been doing the shows consistently at Wednesdays at 5 p.m. because I've been in D.C. and then I've been over in Texas and I've been up in Palm Beach and I've been out of the Pacific Northwest where I had been the past over a year. Then I was in Canada and now back down in South Florida. Been back down here for a few months now. So here and there, but again, that transition to mobilization, availability of the various studios that I've used, that Wednesday, 5 o'clock. Look, if you go to discussyourtruth.com, you will find past episodes streaming 24/7. Now, the point of this was that IanTrottier.com, IanTrottier.com was taken down by the host that I've been using for about 10 years now. I hadn't used the host. I'd used Intranet. They've been using it for the San Francisco-based host. They took it down. They took the website down because I had started a website called StopCommunism.com. No, .net. StopCommunism.net. And about 2 weeks after starting that, the traction grew, and boom, they took that site down. They took it down a whole bunch of other my sites, including iantrottier.com. So I now have a new host with a slightly different look to the landing page. But some of the pages don't exist. If you are familiar with the website and you've gone to the website, it is a little bit different than it has been the past few years. Impact. How I went behind enemy lines in a struggle against the far left. Why, folks? Latest book from Cassandra Spencer. She'll be joining us here in a few moments. Why is the independent journalist, the civilian journalist, and I use that term with much importance, folks. Why is the civilian, the independent civilian, maybe not independent and appropriate, truly independent, because mainstream media is not independent. It's very corporate and therefore caters to the narratives of the profitizing of the corporations. So why is it that the truly independent, whereas that therefore translating now today into the civilian journalist, why is the civilian journalist of the importance that it is today that it hasn't been historically? Whereas that will be the topic of discussion here in the next 40 minutes or so. Now, Cassandra is also joining us from Texas, so we will we'll be hosting her here momentarily. No More Lies. Freedom Reserved, No More Lies. Published by Trine Day. I've had the agreement now for a while, and I know many of you have been waiting for this book to be released. It was due to release last May, and it was postponed because of this pandemic, and it has now been postponed further. But if you have it on pre-order, know that I'm working with publisher to get this going. Again, there is agreement, there is understanding. The book will be published. For some reason, it's not available on Barnes & Noble anymore. But Amazon, Chapters, Indigo, various online accessible, you can still pre-order it. Please do pre-order. I know a number of people that have pre-ordered it. This book will be coming out, and furthermore, I've got to, I'm even starting on a new book. Okay, I'm starting on a new book. That's just the way it is. There's way too much information as a civilian journalist, which I never consider myself a civilian journalist. In fact, I don't even consider myself a radio talk show host. But that's what I do. I do both of those things, don't I? So, but yeah, so it is what it is. Anyway, so Freedom Reserved, No More Lies. You can pre-order it now. Ian Trottier. You can go to my website, iantrottier.com. You can find a link for it right there. You can click it and you can pre-order it. So please do so. And that is what it is. Last hour, we just finished with Curtis Morley, a great business thinker. I recommend, if you are entrepreneurial in spirit, or if you have a great concept or idea, entrepreneursparadox.com. Go to it and reach out to Curtis, buy his book. This is a great business thinker. He's got some incredible accolades. He's a former executive at Franklin Covey, and And there's a lot to be garnered and received from Curtis and his philosophical approach to building your own business. So this was the discussion we just finished last hour, and of course Cassandra Spencer standing by. Let's bring her in now. Let's bring Cassandra Spencer in right now, ladies and gentlemen. Cassandra Spencer. Yeah, this is Discuss the Truth, and this is a pre-recorded session here. Let's see if Cassandra is, let's see here. There you are. Cassandra, hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Welcome to Discuss the Truth. And have you and I met? Do we know each other? I don't think we've met, have we?
I don't think we've ever actually met. No, I don't believe we have.
Okay, so for listeners to understand, so I start the show at the top of the hour, and then I do some dialogue. I just finished with a great business. He's written a book called The Entrepreneurial Paradox. I had him on the last hour. I usually do my shows Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Cassandra, but because of what I was explaining, and listeners will tie this in. What I was explaining is I usually go Wynwood 1. I started my show about 4 years ago, over 4 years ago, in the Wynwood neighborhood of Miami, and would use Wynwood Radio in the studio. But then I went to a different platform. Wynwood 1 is a site that we started. And what I'm tying in here for you, and I want you to give an introduction to listeners, but what I'm tying in for you, Cassandra, is you and I are connected. This is why I asked you that question. You and I are connected through a few mutual friends. That would include Marion Henning, but also, and by the way, Cassandra, she was the first guest on my show.
Oh wow!
Yeah. She found me on Twitter due to the Zika virus, and that's kind of what spawned this broadcast that I've been doing now, closing in on 5 years. But Miriam was, so we've been a friend for years now, and but we also know each other through Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower. So anyway, so welcome to Discuss Your Truth, and Cassandra, take a few moments and please give an introduction to yourself for listeners.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. So, obviously, my name is Cassandra Spencer. The thing that I'm most known for is I was the original Project Veritas whistleblower. So I used to be a contractor at Facebook from 2017 to 2018, and I blew the whistle on, I uncovered documents regarding censorship and, plans to, silence essentially conservative voices on the platform. I leaked the documentation to Project Veritas, lost my job at Facebook because of it, and then eventually I went on to work for Project Veritas as an undercover journalist, where I exposed more big tech stuff, including, you mentioned Zach Voorhees. I was the undercover journalist, one of the undercover journalists on his story. And then I got to help many other whistleblowers tell their stories, as well as do a lot of undercover work into various political campaigns, including Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders. I did work on voter fraud here in Texas, as well as a double voter in New Hampshire and Florida who actually ended up being convicted of felony.
Whoa.
So.
Whoa, you're just throwing that one out there.
Yeah.
So Texas, you're in Texas.
Yes.
We can get into that, but that's a lot you threw out there. So but let's get back to Facebook. What was? Sorry
if I look a little rough. It's been a rough week.
No. No. Of course, you can see that I don't have my video going, but no apologies necessary. So anyway, so rough week in Texas. Were you working for Facebook out of was it Mountain View or Palo Alto? Where were you working with Facebook? Physically?
No, so I was a contractor.
Oh.
I was a contractor at Facebook, and I worked at their Austin facility, so downtown Austin, Texas.
Okay, and so Austin hosts the South by Southwest conference, right? Isn't Austin's known for that? Isn't it?
Yeah, Austin has kind of become like, in essence, kind of the new Silicon Valley. Like we've had a lot of Silicon Valley people moving out here, and a lot of tech companies moving out here. Like, now Tesla's relocated out here. Apple's building a massive campus out here, just because the Bay Area has just gotten, out of control expensive. And so they've all kind of been migrating here to Texas.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, so I'm actually from Northern California originally, and I worked for a small startup, called Retailligence. This was 10 years ago, but we had this small little office on Lytton in Palo Alto, and one of our first, and I was only with him for about a year. Then I got a different offer somewhere else. I went a different route, but one of our first non-disclosures, one of our first supporters. Was Eric? Is it Eric Schmidt? He's the former CEO of Google. Isn't it Eric? Eric Schmidt? I think it's Eric. I'm asking you. Is it Eric?
That sounds right.
Yeah, Eric.
That sounds right. I'm not entirely I wouldn't want to place any bets that I'm right, but that sounds right.
Yeah. Anyway, so the tech industry obviously is something that I'm a little bit familiar with. Not a whole lot. Impact, how I went behind enemy lines in a struggle against the far left. You mentioned Bernie Sanders, so this is this is great. This is juicy. I love it. You can buy it right now. Amazon.com.
You can pre-order it right now.
Pre-order it. Okay.
The book comes out on March 9th is when Impact is the official release date for Impact.
Okay.
Yeah, we have the Kindle pre-orders available right now. The book will be available in paperback, hardcover, as well as Kindle, but those will all be available on March.
Excellent.
Is the actual publication date.
What was it that you found at Facebook that alarmed you as a contractor that caused you to blow the whistle?
So. What was interesting about the Facebook situation is I actually worked in their intellectual property department. I would handle copyright and trademark claims. And so when I took that job, I thought that I would be, kind of immune from dealing with anything that was overtly political, right? You don't think that's going to be the issue you're dealing with. Most of the day is spent taking down illegal streams of Disney movies or Game of Thrones, right? And so occasionally I would get a copyright ticket that would involve a prominent conservative personality. And I started to notice odd notes on their accounts because I'd be looking at the account on the back end to evaluate, the merits of the copyright or trademark claim. And so I saw it once, and I was kind of well, that's a little odd, but you move on. And then you keep seeing it over and over again, and you notice that it's only on the conservative pages. And so then, that obviously piques my curiosity. And so then I start, keeping track of where I'm seeing this code that actually said IA live action deboost live distribution. And did I lose you?
Nope. Okay. We're good.
Okay. So I kept seeing this code, and then, I kind of go down the proverbial rabbit hole. And eventually I come across documents that talk about a troll report, which was very thinly guised, referring to conservatives, saying trolls use certain language MSM for mainstream media. And
okay, we may have lost her actually. Cassandra, can you hear me? Okay, she did pre-warn me by saying that the reception may be shoddy. Let's see if we can get her back in. She's in Texas. Okay, Cassandra, if you can hear me, we can't hear you. So we're just waiting for this to re-collaborate. Okay, I'm just waiting to see if Cassandra gets back on. If we get her back. Okay, I'm in Miami, and I've got a Wi-Fi signal. I've got a strong Wi-Fi signal. So this is okay. We've lost her. That's fine. I've got. It's all right. Okay, there she is. Let's bring this back, and Cassandra.
Okay, well, now what are you going to do with it? And, there's no internal reporting mechanism at Facebook where if you notice something that you think is off, that you can, bring up your concerns, especially as, a contractor to someone higher up the company. And so I ended up deciding to go to Project Veritas. I saw a tweet by James O'Keefe, asking if there was anyone on the insides of these tech companies to reach out. So I sent an email to the tip line and then it just went from there. Excellent.
Now, I've been in contact with. Anyway, I've had a representative from Project Veritas on the program as well. We see my listeners are familiar with Project Veritas. Was that a productive decision of yours, Cassandra, to join teams with Project Veritas?
Was it productive? I'm sorry, you cut out for a second.
Was that a good decision? Yeah.
I think at the time, I did not know whether it was because I lost my job very quickly. I ended up in complete poverty. I ended up having to apply for food stamps.
Wow.
Which, I was a single mom who put themselves through college.
Wow.
I had never had to apply for food stamps or anything like that. But it got to a point where my old roommate and I, we didn't even know if we were going to be able to make rent. And so I had to swallow my pride and do whatever it took to survive in that moment. And so in that moment, I did not know whether I made the right choice. It seemed like a stupid decision because I gave up, stable job, easy job, good job, and was kind of thrust into the unknown. Now, eventually, I went on to work for Project Veritas full time as an undercover journalist, which that's a whole other story that's in the book of what led me to end up doing that. And so the work that I ended up doing as an undercover journalist was so rewarding and so important that, yes, it was a productive choice, even though it was very hard to see that, and I had to have faith for a long time before I was able to see the results, the positive, result of me making that decision.
Is Project Veritas, in your view, is that a reputable source for listeners to go to receive reporting on issues?
Yes, absolutely. Having been an undercover journalist there, they are so prone to lawsuits. They're 8-0 in lawsuits.
Wow.
So I would say it's extremely reputable because they are under such constant attack from the mainstream press or the legacy media, whatever you want to call them. That if their reporting was not as accurate as it is, then they would have been sued into oblivion and into bankruptcy by now. But time after time, they've won these lawsuits because the reporting speaks for itself. Because this is a form of reporting where you have people on video speaking in their own words. This isn't, an anonymous source said. This is, okay, well, guy who works for the Bernie Sanders campaign says that they want to throw Republicans into gulags. It's his mouth moving. You can see him on the tape. He's very clearly speaking in complete sentences. These people never come back and say, oh, no, I didn't say that. It's clearly you. So I think it's a very reputable source. Of course, I do have an inherent bias having worked there. But I stand by all the reporting that I've ever done. Like I said, it's already led to at least one felony conviction of a double voter in New Hampshire and Florida. So obviously that was a reputable report that exposed some of the vulnerabilities in our electoral system.
Now, I mentioned Zach Voorhees for listeners, and if folks are not familiar with him, the president called him an American hero in Doral. I don't know if you're familiar with that story, not Cassandra, but so here's a former Google Earth engineer, and he's coming across an algorithm called machine learning fairness, and he says, wait a second, these are attacking conservative voices. Now, I try to be bipartisan and frankly nonpartisan. in my approach to discussions, again, so the parallel here is that you're a contractor for Facebook, and you're saying that, hey, Facebook is going after conservative voices as well. Were you, at that time, was there any particular side of the aisle that you found yourself residing on politically, or did you reside on either side?
I think I always have been, slightly right of center. I don't try to hide that, but because of what I was seeing, I really, especially because I knew that there was a high probability I would lose my job if I leaked this information, right? I wasn't deluded into thinking that this tech company was never going to figure out what was going on.
Right.
So I intentionally then would look at pages of left-leaning. I thought I had several working theories. I thought maybe this was just like a mainstream outlet versus independent outlet kind of thing. So I looked at more left-leaning independent outlets, kind of like the Young Turks or like Colin Kaepernick. I didn't see these notes appear on those pages. So I tried to, test the theory that I had to see, is it really against conservative thought, or is it, mainstream versus independent? Is it, just one or two accounts? But this is something I saw probably over, I would guess, a total of half a dozen accounts that were always prominent conservatives. And so to me at that point, and especially then when I saw the documentation of what they were referring to as trolls, it very clearly was targeting language that was used by right-leaning sites, because the left, no one refers to the mainstream media as the mainstream media or the MSM. No one talks about that on the left side of the aisle, right? That's clearly vernacular that's used by the right. And calling people like normies, and mind you, this is several years ago. Mm-hmm. Some of this language has been co-opted by the left a little bit more, but back then it was not. So to me, it was pretty clear, and I felt like I did my due diligence in testing my theory to see whether it was occurring to people on the other side of the aisle, or whether it really was just conservatives.
Cassandra, in your view, did the left steal the 2020 election?
Not in the sense that, that's like a very loaded term, I think. I think that there were many things that the left did to tip the scales in the 2020 election. I think stole is a strong word, but big tech, by doing the things they did, by affecting their algorithms, by biasing, the censorship, they definitely put their thumb very strongly on the scale. And that's why, to me, and I've been saying this ever since my identity was made public, was that big tech is actually the biggest threat to our democracy. And that should concern anybody, whether they are left, right, or center, is that these completely unelected corporations have entirely too much power over our public discourse, over our daily lives. Yeah. And that's kind of been my biggest fight, personally. So even though, yes, I am a right-leaning person, and yes, the censorship is affecting the right more right now, but I don't want to see that happen to anybody.
And this is a loaded response as well. So I think for listeners to identify where you might be going, Cassandra, would be Section 230. But let's backtrack. I want to go into a different. You've basically gone into a term that I was talking about when I did my intro, in that what we're seeing today is, I think, as a result of I'm going to say it, the corruption in mainstream media. Now, there's corruption in both left and right sides of that media pyramid. But and that's a key word that I'm throwing out as well. But because of that corruption, and now big tech is threads into that, but it's also separate. But it's part of it. Because of that corruption, the importance of people like Cassandra. And even what I do here with the Discussion of Truth, the importance of that kind of civilian independent reporter is becoming more and more important. And how do you In your view, Cassandra, what kind of drives this corruption in the mainstream media, MSN?
It's kind of, and people like to throw around the term like a deep state. And I don't view the deep state as being some sort of conspiracy theory or anything like that, or this cabal of people twirling their mustaches. What I think the deep state and also the legacy media are, it's a bunch of self-serving bureaucrats who they've achieved a certain amount of wealth, they've achieved a certain amount of power, and they will do whatever it takes to maintain and hold that. And that's not even necessarily it's not even so much that they have a partisan agenda as they have a self-serving agenda. Whatever is going to preserve their power, grow their power, they will do whatever it takes to get more power, maintain the power they have. And that's kind of, I think, where the corruption comes in, is because you have so much power consolidated into the hands of such a small number of, I think it's almost all the media outlets are owned by 6 corporations.
Right, yeah. Right,
so
yeah, exactly.
I think that's where you're kind of seeing that. And I think you have a similar phenomenon that happens in government, tech, and media. It's all kind of the same concept, where you have a small number of people who are in power and will do whatever it takes to maintain that power.
So, we live in we're living in a kind of a free trade, free enterprise type economic society. However, like you just said, the mainstream media is owned by about 6 different corporations, and that's changed through the recent decades. Whereas in the 80s, I think you could identify close to 100 different corporations owning the main media outlets, but that's becoming consolidated, and the power is being narrowed to fewer and fewer as time goes on. What is that a product of? Is that a product of capitalism? What is that a product of?
I wouldn't say that's a product of capitalism. If anything, that's a product of kind of like a cronyism, and just that's interesting because, I wouldn't say that that's pure capitalism, because when you have a market that, essentially, if you look at Facebook's acquisition of Instagram and WhatsApp, they're consolidating their power. And if you look at how Amazon took down Parler, I think that's probably the prime example here in recent history. I guess Parler's back up within the past few days, where anytime that there's an attempt for there to be a competitor, that these companies are working sometimes in coordination with each other, whether it be I know less about the media space, admittedly, than I do the tech space, where you have these companies that are working essentially as one body, even though they are separate entities, to eliminate any competition. And to me, that's not pure capitalism.
Yeah, this is a great point, and it makes me think of a recent guest. He's actually been on the show a few times. Tom Hartman. Are you familiar with the progressive talk show host Tom Hartman?
No, I don't believe I'm familiar with him.
Tom's put out a series of books, and he's kind of dived into the judicial system, the Superior Court, and his most recent installment is going into the U.S. monopolies. Historically, the country has had a problem with monopolies, whether it be from the influence of the British West Indies Company during the foundation in 1776 to one of its products, the Standard Oil, in the power and struggle of power control through the Rockefeller Foundation. And so, and that comes to light in the development of the Council on Foreign Relations and other organizations and political think tanks that are tied to some of these corporations. But let's get into your book, Cassandra, Impact: How I Went Behind Enemy Lines in Our Struggle Against the Far Left. What does that mean? And speak a little bit about the book.
Okay, so basically what the title means is, because I was an undercover journalist, and essentially my whole life, I was born in Hawaii, and then when I started college, I went to NYU. So I spent my whole life surrounded by the left. All my formative years, I actually went to the same school that Barack Obama went to. His 5th grade teacher was my 4th grade teacher.
What?
So, yeah. true story. Not the same time. I'm younger than Barack Obama.
Well, you look
significantly.
And you're more attractive.
Yeah, it's true. True story, though.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. All right. What's the name of the school?
Punahou School in Hawaii.
In Honolulu?
Hawaii.
Where is it?
Mm-hmm.
In Honolulu. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I know Honolulu. I've surfed Waikiki, and I know that Duke statue there in Hawaii is wonderful. So you go from the literal furthest left side of the country over to, not politically speaking, over to the furthest right side of the country. Anyway, so you're talking about NYU and going behind enemy lines in the struggle against the far left.
Right. And so because I kind of grew up amongst the left, and, most of my friends from high school and everything else, they're all left of center too. And so then I found myself in this position, I'm at a left-leaning company. I'm at Facebook. So I'm, essentially in the belly of the beast there as a conservative working at Facebook. And then eventually I go on to become an undercover journalist. And so then I'm literally in the political campaigns of Bernie Sanders and Beto O'Rourke.
Wow.
And I find myself there for months at a time, surrounded by people who are, in some cases extremely far left, to the point of political violence and radicalism.
Kamala Harris?
I don't know how familiar you are with, there was a tape that came out of a Bernie Sanders staffer where he literally talked very unironically, not joking, about he wanted to put Republicans either in re-education camps or to line them up on the beach and shoot them.
Wow.
He even talked about killing the Clintons. He talked about how if Bernie Sanders didn't win the nomination, that cities were going to burn and that cops were going to get beat up. And this is 2019. This is before all the riots in 2020 started. So It was very telling of what was going to happen, down the road. And so this guy, it's like I'm spending time with these people, and so I am behind enemy lines. I'm actually a conservative, but I'm undercover because I'm an undercover journalist amongst these people. And it's because I grew up around, people who are far left. Mind you, the people who I associate with are not extremists or violent, but because I kind of know the vernacular, I know how, I know what their arguments are, I know how they think. It made it where it was very easy for me to go into an undercover role because it's that's how I grew up. These are the kinds of people I grew up around. I feel completely comfortable being surrounded by people who I don't agree with. In fact, sometimes I feel more comfortable being surrounded by people I don't agree with than being around, at a conservative event because I'm not used to it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that is. Are you in a position to reveal the name of this individual, and where did that individual get these? Where did he get these concepts, or like you're saying, this is 2019, so this is kind of a precursor to what we experienced in 2020. Was this person being fed information from somewhere, and if they were, from where were they receiving it?
Well, he admitted that he was part of Antifa. He even had a giant Antifa sticker on his laptop. Because it was interesting because I remember I was working undercover and, I had sent in my report for that day and they're like, oh, I get back a report from my supervisor being like, you need to corroborate that, he's involved with Antifa, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you guys just read the transcript. You didn't see the video, did you? And they're like, well, no, we haven't had a chance to review the video yet. And I said, he has a giant sticker on his laptop that says Antifa. He's not trying to hide it.
Right.
And so where he's getting these ideologies, I think it's from some of these, very radical far left groups. His name was Kyle Jurek. I'm not uncomfortable. His name was revealed in the Project Veritas release. I believe that was published in January of 2020 is when the piece actually came out. It was just 2019 when I was in Iowa. But yeah, I mean, you see these kind of radical people and it wasn't just him. That was the problem is out of the, 8 or 9 people that worked in the office, all but maybe 1 or 2 were as radical as he was.
Wow.
By his own admission. And I said that was something unique to that campaign. Because I remember even saying, I was like, I've been in a lot of political campaigns at this point. I was in the campaign of almost every Democrat that was running in that primary at some point or another. And I said, there was something off about that group of people. And I said, it's something that's dangerous and radical. It was the first time where I actually had to go to my supervisor and be like, listen, I think this person's dangerous. I need backup, as in, like, I don't want to be the only journalist around with this individual.
Cassandra was, okay, there's a few tie-ins here. We've got the second impeachment of a sitting president that just transpired, within the past 2 weeks, he's being impeached when he's out of office, or he's being impeached as a civilian. But then we've got this comment by was it Lindsey Graham saying that Kamala Harris should be articles of impeachment filed against her for language that she's spoken in support of the BLM movement that's caused some of this violence. So it's kind of some of these stories. When you were working in 2009 with this fellow that was openly supporting Antifa and certainly advertising it, was Bernie Sanders aware of this?
I don't think he did anything to discourage it.
Wow.
While Bernie Sanders, and that's the thing you'll notice kind of with these politicians, is, politicians are slick, they're polished. Very rarely are you going to get the actual politician on record saying anything that's going to be considered extreme. But when you look at the people who they hire, if you look at the people who they pay to be representatives of them, of their campaign, and like I said, this wasn't just one guy. This was not a volunteer. This was a paid staffer. And if you looked at this office of people, and then Project Veritas went around to multiple Bernie Sanders offices around the country and found staffers, paid staffers, all saying the exact types of things, supporting gulags, supporting violent action in the streets. Like, oh, I want to arm up and, I want to take it to the streets. I want to, attack cops. I want to attack ICE. And so it became something where it's like, it's very clearly you, and I will specify once again that this was different. While you may have seen some elements of this in other political campaigns, in the Bernie campaign, it was the most blatant and obvious, where it was like the majority of your staffers are this way. It's not just, this is not an anomaly by any means.
But he's the really easygoing hippie type non-conflict, isn't he? No, I'm kidding.
No, he's just in all honesty, I spent one time, I spent probably several hours within 10 feet of Bernie Sanders. I did not really talk to him directly much, but in my opinion, he's just a grumpy old man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I do write about some of these experiences because I had so many in-person experiences with these politicians, from having to hold Joe Biden's hand for 3 minutes. Awkward. And, I've met, and then I write, not every politician I had a bad experience with. I met Pete Buttigieg, talked to him for like 15 minutes. And I even write how if you're not doing anything that's like weird or like dishonest in the moment when I'm talking to you, then I'm not going to have a story. Like,
mm-hmm.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg and I had a pleasant conversation for 15 minutes. Now, if I stayed enough time with his staffers, would I have maybe found something? Possibly. But, I met Tulsi Gabbard. I met pretty much every person who was running as a Democrat for the primaries. Even Marianne Williamson, all of them.
Wow. I'm gonna go a different direction here. We can return to that, but talk a little bit about this teacher that you shared in common with Barack Obama. Are there any things that stand out about her teaching style that of course you're being a conservative here, and Barack Obama being a liberal? Did this person, do you think, influence Barack in a certain way that maybe did not influence you, or maybe vice versa? What kind of teacher was this?
No, I mean, you have to remember, this is his 5th grade teacher and my 4th grade teacher. So
yeah.
While maybe there might have been some, like, very kind of subtle elements of, introducing, because it seems nowadays that they're injecting kind of leftism ideologies younger and younger, but it's certainly nothing that I noticed in elementary school. I mainly remember him teaching me the multiplication tables and things like that. I would say no, but it's just definitely an environment, because Punahou School is one of a handful of extremely elite private schools in the state of Hawaii. Hawaii's public school education is generally considered one of the worst in the country. And so Barack Obama went to a very, very elite private school. And of course, I'm sure a Facebook fact checker will fact check me, but I know that the tuition, even from kindergarten through 12th grade, is somewhere in the ballpark of $20,000 a year to send kids to this school. And so, I don't make any bones in my book. I don't pretend that I came from, this salt of the earth working class family. I didn't. I grew up very privileged, but so did Barack Obama. His grandparents were able to afford to send him to this very fancy private school. And so I do think there is something in there that kind of shaped the education, and it maybe shaped some of my worldview, but I don't think, if anything, I think that growing up in such a left-leaning environment has made me stronger in my beliefs as a, I wouldn't say like I'm very conservative, but slightly right of center. And I think it's really sharpened my abilities to think on my feet and to be able to have discussions with people who don't think the same way that I do.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So now let's go to Antifa. What for listeners to understand? What are they, in your knowledge and your understanding? How long has Antifa been in the United States, and where does it come from?
So Antifa, it's just like it's a very loose coalition, and it tends to breed from the most extreme parts of socialist groups in the United States that are less radical. But then there's always kind of that, I would say, 5% of every... so Democratic Socialists of America is a very large organization. I've dealt with many DSA chapters over the course of my time as an undercover journalist. And most of them are, a lot of them are actually relatively decent people who mean well, and they just have a very different ideology from me. That, I still think their ideology would be dangerous to our country, but them themselves I do not think are dangerous. But there's that 5% of each of these clubs that those are your hardcore radicals, and those are the ones who join the Antifa groups. Those are the ones you see out in the streets, causing a lot of the destruction we see, violence against our police officers, calling for, I've seen videos of people calling for Republicans should get the guillotine. This Kyle Jurek person talked about lining people up on the beach and shooting them, and very openly talked about wanting to send people like Jeff Bezos to, work on a chain gang and have to crush rocks because they're a billionaire.
Wow. So they're almost I guess they're an anarchy organization. Why is it?
Yeah, a lot of them they do consider themselves mostly anarcho-communists.
Why is it that it seems that this is my perception, perhaps it's incorrect, but why is it that they seem to pop up in Democratic-run cities rather than conservative cities, like New York, Chicago, Portland? Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting is that if you actually look at what a lot of these kids are, in my experience, is it seems like it's mainly white kids, and they mainly come from homes that are, middle to upper middle class, which is really kind of fascinating. And it's almost, to me, I don't know, I'm not the expert on Antifa. Like I know Andy No, he has a book out like that specifically. I would say he's kind of like the expert on Antifa. But to me, it comes across to me after having, talked to several people who are part of Antifa, where they feel like they somehow missed out on being part of like the great civil rights struggle or, any of these other great struggles throughout history. And it's almost like they've kind of invented this struggle somewhat in their heads, where they think that Republicans and like conservatives are these like fascists who are trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do exactly in their minds, but they think the police are basically out there just like randomly shooting black people. And so they justify this in their heads, and that's how they justify these actions. It is almost like a mental illness in a lot of ways. It comes across as very delusional, in my opinion.
I like how you said that, and that's wonderfully well put. Are there any in your understanding, knowledge, research? Are there any parallels between because my perception is that there's some type of overlapping here between Antifa and BLM, and it seems like the players may be playing off of each other to help fuel the individual motives of the two organizations. Are there any funding overlaps that you found?
I don't know anything about how these Antifa groups are funded. I will say that a good comparison is, the difference between a square and a rectangle. So while not all members of BLM are part of Antifa, all members of Antifa are supporters of BLM.
Wow.
In my opinion, from what I've seen. Mind you, once again, that's my experience, but I've never seen it where somebody is part of Antifa and they're like, I hate BLM. But I do not think that everyone who's part of BLM is part of Antifa by any means. I think that would be, because I have friends who support the Black Lives Matter movement, mm-hmm. and they're certainly not part of Antifa, and they're not in support of these violent riots. But I think that the message Black Lives Matter has gotten very kind of twisted with the kind of corporate entity that is Black Lives Matter, which I think is much more somewhat insidious, because people seem to not be able to take the statement and some of the ideas that you're told what Black Lives Matter stands for and separate it from what the organization is actually doing in practice, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does, and I appreciate that, the commentary on that. I want to get your view now on what we've been experiencing globally. And again, I've got author and independent journalist Cassandra Spencer with me. You can get her book at Amazon.com, Impact, How I Went Behind Enemy Lines in Our Struggle Against the Far Left. The discussion we're having is eye-opening. I think it's very informative, and I appreciate it, Cassandra. But let's get to, for a moment, in your view, having the expertise that you have with these various organizations. What's happening here now? This question is basically it comes from the premise for you to understand of me doing what I do, and of course I mentioned to you that Marion was the first guest on my program, and I was actually invited to start this. Wynwood Radio invited me in to start this, and I says, okay, well, because I told them about the research that I've done on the Zika virus. So here in Miami Beach, 2016, there was this Zika virus buzz that was going on, and the local media causing this frenzy and hysteria, and telling people to spray themselves with this DEET, the mosquito repellent. We've got at the same time Oxitec, a British-owned lab running on state-granted land. I think it's in Marathon Key, releasing genetically modified mosquitoes into the atmosphere. We've got a woman from Key West meeting in D.C. With the EPA with a bunch of signatures to try to get the laboratory investigated and closed down. And she mysteriously is found dead. in a swimming pool the morning before she meets with the EPA. Anyway, so Miriam's the first guest on the program, and of course you probably know about her and the honeybee honey colony collapse disorder and what she's done on her angle that aligns with yours as being an investigative journalist. She reaches out to me, and I invite her on the program. So anyway, so Zika, and then the controversy at the time in Miami Beach, 2016, with the pesticide known as Naled, a couple different trade names. Diabrom is another one. And then I start this show, and then I go down the avenue of all sorts of different avenues, and wow, here we are today. But in your view now, so not seeing what the future held, I was actually in the Northwest at the time. And then in my experience, Cassandra, I'm in South Beach, 2016. I've got the Zika virus, which was a epidemic, and I think there were some cases in San Diego. But we were being told that this thing had come from Recife in Brazil, and then here we are today, and it's now been over a year that we've had this global epidemic known as a pandemic with COVID-19, which is a coronavirus. What is this? What's going on here in your view, Cassandra, with COVID-19?
It's been very confusing even for me as somebody who's been a journalist. Now, mind you, I stopped working at Project Veritas at the beginning of 2020, so before the COVID thing started. So I have not kind of been out in the field this whole time. But I would say that there's definitely, it's very strange to me that things that were considered conspiracy theories a year ago are now suddenly, like now that the mainstream press is embracing them, are suddenly fact, right? Like the whole idea, the Cuomo thing is obviously the most prominent one that's in the news right now. You know, you were called a conspiracy theorist if you said that Andrew Cuomo was responsible for all these nursing home deaths even several months ago. And then now I believe it's even the World Health Organization is saying that it's likely that this virus came from a lab in China. So once again, it was like, I thought we were told that it came from bats at a wet market. That was the, accepted explanation of where this virus came from when this all began. So I don't know what's going on, but I do find that there's enough oddities with the whole situation where just things don't add up. And I hope that there are more, if there's somebody out there who's listening to this program who knows anything, then by all means go to my former employer, Project Veritas. They have a tip line, veritastips@protonmail.com, and help expose this, because, this is one of the biggest events that we've had historically in our lifetime, if not the biggest. And, it's destroyed the global economy. It's destroyed so many lives. I've been personally affected by it. The people in my circle have been personally affected by it. And so I don't even know. If I were to wager a guess at what was going on completely, I would feel that I was overreaching from my level of experience.
Yeah. Well said. And I would, I would think, and I'll tell you this much, Cassandra. When I first started this program, like I said, I had no intention of doing it, and I was tweeting. I'd gone. A good friend of mine from Brooklyn, rest his soul. He invited me to this town hall meeting. I'm coming back. I'm driving across the MacArthur Causeway. I'm heading back to South Beach, and a guy calls me, and we'd been very good friends at that point for about 5 years. And he says, Ian, you got to come to the town hall meeting with me tonight. And there's this local debate about the Zika virus and the pesticide being used, and and before that, I didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh my gosh, I can't get bit by a mosquito because it's carrying the Zika virus. And then I go to the town hall meeting, and I'm sitting in this town hall meeting, and there's 300 people, and the Philip Levine, who's the mayor at the time, and he's on the phone with somebody in the CDC, and he's got his personal lawyer with him, and he's got the other city council members with him, and there's only one city council person that is. They're speaking out against the pesticide, and everybody else is just kind of going along with it, with the spraying of this pesticide, whereas there's this outcry. Well, what was interesting is that the pesticide was causing what's known as microcephaly, which was the retardation of the growth of the brain in the fetus. But then the CDC is telling us the Zika virus is doing the same thing. So the locals are saying, well, wait a second, use use an organic, a safer pesticide. That Broward was using something that's safer. And then the local mayor in Miami-Dade was just adamant with Scott at the governor's office. So they were just adamant about using this pesticide, which was known to cause microcephaly, but it was like this double standard because the Zika virus is also causing this microcephaly. So anyway, so I started doing the show, and Marion found me on Twitter and says, "Hey, can you write an article for my website?" Just as somebody that was exposed to this. And I said, sure. So I spent probably 3 weeks of some real intense research, and I wrote this article. And I'll tell you what, Cassandra, I had nobody that would pay any heed to the information that I had uncovered. And it kind of it coincides with what you said about some of these what considered to be theories now are more accepted. I just, for the longest time, I had Alan McCoy, for instance. Alan McCoy was one of the early guests on the program, and he's got a PhD from Yale. And this is what's interesting, Sandra. So he'd written his thesis off of research that he had done on the Golden Triangle of the opium trade in the Far East Asia, and he returned to New Haven. And he gets a knock on his door. And again, this is a guy working on his PhD. I don't know how old he is at the time, 22. I don't know what it is. He gets a knock on his door, and it's the CIA. And the CIA is telling him to hand over all of his research. He says, "What are you talking about? This is my thesis. I'm a researcher. I'm working on my PhD." Again, remind you, this is Yale. And so he sues the CIA, and he wins. He wins. So this is, these are kind of the stories that I was kind of uncovering when I'm doing and I'm going down these various avenues, all starting with the debate on the Zika virus and the pesticide at the time. Now it's like, oh my gosh, some of these are kind of like golden nuggets for some of these people that never really looked into this. So again, I'm getting back to the importance of a civilian independent researcher that's not aligned themselves to mainstream media, and really the phenomena of why that's becoming increasingly important. Anyway, so as we wind down, and I thank you for your time greatly, I'd like you to leave some closing remarks, some closing thoughts for listeners, and again, Cassandra Spencer, independent researcher, author of Impact: How I Went Behind Enemy Lines in Our Struggle Against the Far Left. It's now on pre-order. Go there now. Pre-order copy for you, you and your family and a friend, associates. Do it now. Do it today. Cassandra, some closing comments, some closing thoughts for listeners.
Just some closing thoughts are that you never know when you're going to be in the position. Like you said, the importance of the kind of citizen journalist, citizen researcher. And when I worked at Facebook, I never anticipated being in a position to blow the whistle on something like having to do with political censorship. But there will be times in your life where you are at the right place at the right time, and you have a choice to make the right decision or not. And I knew that making the right decision was not going to be easy. I knew that it probably meant losing my job. And there were a lot of hard times ahead. I won't sugarcoat it. But it was without a doubt the correct decision. And in the long run, now that I can kind of see the grand scope of what I have been able to do with my life, it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Wonderful. Beautifully well said. A wonderful way to end the program. Cassandra Spencer, ladies and gentlemen. Cassandra, thank you for joining Discussing the Truth.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ian. I appreciate it.
Look, okay, so I say this, I started the show 2016, and I'm now coming up on the 5th year of this program, and Cassandra probably said things the most beautifully they've been said, perhaps of any of the episodes that I've done. But folks, regardless of where you stand politically, I don't take a political side on the program. Yes, Donald Trump called me a prize fighter. That was because of my physical appearance. Okay, that wasn't because of what I do. Or maybe he knew what I do. I don't know. But he called me price fighter. I have it on video. IanTrottier.com. I'm simply somebody like you. Whether you are, you consider yourself liberal or you consider yourself a conservative, I'm simply a human being like you. And I enjoy living in peace. I enjoy privacy. I enjoy honesty. I enjoy having people that I can trust and I can love. I think those are probably all characteristics that you identify yourself with as having. I would hope so. What makes things beautiful in the United States is that we live under a constitution which is, in my view, the most perfect governing document ever written by the minds of men, okay, or human beings. Okay, not I mean gender biased. I didn't write it. And it's that foundation upon which this country has built itself into a melting pot of all cultures and religions and languages globally. No other no other government has done that outside as well as the United States has. So, yes, when your values, when your conviction is called into place, there will be a time in your life where you will need to stand up for what is right and do that with honor. This has been another discussion of truth. I'm your host, Ian Hamilton Trottier. Look for my next episode coming up very shortly. And again, Freedom Reserved, No More Lies is available. Amazon.com on pre-order. Go now. Until next episode, until next discussion, folks, be awesome.